Welcome, everyone, to the Preschool Mindfulness Summit. I'm really excited to introduce you to Sonia Maystone Cotton. She's the author of Promoting Young Children's Emotional Health and Well-Being, and she works as a nurture consultant in Bath in the UK with a small team called Three Ways Brighter Futures, and she supports 4-year-old children with their transition into from preschool into regular school. She's going to tell us about the children and the challenges that they face and how she uses mindfulness to support them. So her session today is practical ways to use mindfulness with young children, which I'm sure will be resonate with many people. We have loads of preschool teachers who are always welcome, Sonia, so much for joining us on the summit.
Thank you so much for asking me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about the children that you work with in Bath.
Okay, so I work with 4-year-old children who have been identified by their nurseries or preschools as probably going to find some difficulty when they start school in September. And these children mainly have issues around the area of personal, social and emotional and mental health difficulties. So there'll be children for a whole range of reasons why they're struggling. It may be that life at home is quite difficult. There may be some attachment issues. There often are attachment difficulties. Some of those children might be in the care system, although not all of them. But they've all been recognised that actually they find life quite hard, and the transition to school is a huge transition. And so it's recognising that they're going to need that additional support to help them get through. So I will work with them all year and with their TAs, their one-to-one workers and their teachers. So I go in once a week and support the school and support the children.
Okay, wow. So a big task for you, and but it's great that the system is providing that support for kids who need it, and that's really wonderful. So tell us, why do you use mindfulness in your work?
So lots of the children I work with can be really dysregulated. They can find in a moment, so we're really familiar with the term of flipping their lids. So that's kind of the children I work with are often in that moment of flipping their lid. They can very quickly become very dysregulated and become very overwhelmed by what's going on. And what we've learned as a team and what I've learned over the years is that mindfulness is a really good way to help them, to bring them down, to recognise what's going on in their bodies. So we do lots of work. We use an assessment programme in Britain called Thrive, and we do lots of work around recognising what's going on for them, recognising where they're at, helping them to identify those feelings and emotions, and trying to get in there before they flip their lids. But it's trying to help the children to understand that we all have very strong feelings, and very strong feelings are okay, but we need to think very carefully about how we manage those. So we use script a lot. We use a lot of emotion language. So a lot of the time I'm saying, I can see you're really cross right now, but it's not okay to hit me. I'm here to keep you safe. And then as part of that, then we will use mindfulness as a way of helping them to calm, to regulate. So it's one of many tools that we use, but I think it's a tool that I'm increasingly using. And it looks different with different children and at different moments. So it may be doing some breathing exercises with them and getting them to stand and breathe and notice. It might be making a calming bottle with them. So in the run up to Christmas is a really hard time for our children because they find change very difficult. So preschool practitioners are amazing at doing some wonderful things around Christmas. But for our children, actually, endless practices of the nativity is quite challenging. And the classroom changing can be a bit overwhelming, and there's lots of noise and it's different, so they find that quite hard. So we've made lots of calming bottles over the last few weeks. So it's a bottle with glitter in and water in. Think about a snow globe. You shake it and it's all fizzy. And you talk about how the child has very fizzy feelings inside them, and you get them to shake it and to recognise what's going on in their body and to do some breathing. So they put their hand on their tummy and they're taking deep breaths and they're noticing and they're breathing. And while the snow globe or the shaker is calming, we're encouraging them and saying by your breathing, you're beginning to calm what's going on in your body. So our hope is that eventually we get them to the point where they can say, I need my calming bottle. I need to do my mindfulness, or I need to do a breathing, or I need to do some bubble breathing. And by the end of the year, some get there, some don't. Some it's still kind of work in progress, and we're still, reminding them years on. But my feeling is if they can learn that from a really young age, that's such a valuable life skill.
Yeah.
And will really help them in their later life, because things are always going to be tricky to them for some extent. Yeah. But it's giving them that really good start.
Yeah, I love that, Sonia, and I love what you said about giving these kids and all kids these skills when they're at such a young age. I think, we're seeing now all this mental health issues with older children, and I think if we can put these type of things into schools, into preschools, maybe some of that, as you said, the life skill will be there, and they'll always have that they can carry with them. So wonderful. So maybe you can share some stories of particular children or situations with mindfulness in your work.
Sure. So I had one little boy last year who at the beginning of the year found it very, very difficult. He would become dysregulated most of the time. And that would be, lots of screaming, lots of hitting and kicking and all those kind of things. And we used the usual. We used calming bottles with him, and that worked. And we talked about breathing. I did bubble breathing with him quite a lot, which can work really nicely. But none of them quite seemed to kind of click for him. He quite liked them, but it didn't always have the impact I wanted. And then I on a moment of this is just not working, I decided to use a YouTube video with him called Starfish Breathing. So if you go on YouTube and you put in Starfish Breathing, it's a really lovely, I think it's part of the Zen yoga program. Yeah. Beautiful, 5-minute, really short. So I got him we played on my iPad. I got him to lie on the floor and stretch his arms and legs out and pretend he was a starfish. And I did the same, and his TA did the same, and we were in a quiet room, and we played this. And as the talk over is about, imagine you're a starfish, imagine you're at the bottom of the ocean, and you kind of, it's partly a visualization, and it just gently talked him through it, and then it talked through a very simple breathing, and it just had the most amazing impact on him. He was so calm and peaceful at the end. And then I asked him, I said, how did you find that? Was that okay? And he went, I loved it, Sonia. I'm going to tell Mummy. So we then started using that regularly, and we told Mum about it, and we're encouraging her to use it at home. And it got to the point by the end of the year where he would say, I need to do my starfish breathing. And that was just wonderful. So very simple. But again, I think sometimes with mindfulness, we can think there's one way to do it and we've got to use that way. And we're all individuals. All the children I work with are very different. So it's finding the strategy that's going to work for them. So sometimes that's about trying different things. But that one really worked for him, which was just brilliant, really good.
Oh, I love that story. Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, I think sometimes we try one thing and it doesn't work, and then we think, oh, that doesn't work with the kids. And you have to try a few different things, don't you, to find what works best. Yeah.
And sometimes different things work on different days, Sure. So the one that I did a calming bottle with last week, I think he was really enthusiastic and he'll love it and that will really work probably to the end of term. Come January, we might need to do some other things with him. He might, get a bit bored with that and want to try some other techniques. And that's fine. Within my own practice, there are different meditations I use on different days, depending on how I'm feeling and what's going on. It's the same with children.
Yeah, that's great. Can you, you've told us quite a few practical things that you're doing. Can you tell us some of the other mindfulness tools that you're using and maybe explain some of you mentioned breath before?
Yeah. So one that I do sometimes is rocking a doll or a teddy bear to sleep. So it's kind of taken from the Mindful Child book by Susan Kaiser Greenland, and I quite like that. So you lie a child on their back, and you get them to choose a cuddly toy or a doll or something like that to place on their tummy, and you talk to them about, we're going to rock your toy to sleep. It needs to go to sleep now, and you're going to rock them to sleep by your breathing. So you need to lie still, and you need to take in deep breaths and out again. And by doing that, your tummy naturally goes up and down. And so it's rocking. So it's gentle movement. And they love that. That really works. That's quite a nice one to use at the end of the day. I use bubble breathing quite a lot. So in the idea of, if you're having a panic attack, it's known as an adult, you can use 7-11 breathing. But I use bubbles because they're very beautiful. We use bubbles in lots of different ways. But bubble breathing works really well into getting a child who's very kind of short breath, very agitated, very in that moment, quite distressed. If you bring out some bubbles and get them to take a deep breath and breathe out slowly through the bubble wand, you're basically doing your 7-11. So you're bringing in more oxygen into the blood, and it's kind of slowing your heart rate down. It's quite mindful because you're slow. It works best when you've done it slowly. And then it's about watching those bubbles. Where are they going? Where is it? Doing it outside is great, but even doing it inside. So I'm someone who carries bubbles around in my handbag quite a lot. I have been known in supermarkets on an agitated child to whip out my bubbles, or on a bus, or strange looks. But I'm like, oh no, it's fine. I work with children. It'll be okay. But actually, it works really well. I think those are my favourite ones. Sometimes I do finger breathing. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. So you put your hand up, so I can get it in the camera so you can see. And then I'm trying to balance my iPad. So you put your hand up, and then with your other hand, you trace up your finger and down again. So as you breathe in, you trace up the thumb and then down as you breathe out. So you go around the whole hand. So you're breathing in as you go up the finger, down again. So it's kind of very simple finger breathing. I've got classes that use that, teachers who use that with the whole class. So although I work with the individual child, I've got classes who will use that as a whole class activity. When they can see it's all getting too much, I might go, right, okay, let's do some finger breathing. Let's sit and do this. And it brings everybody down. I've also sometimes used some stories and things like that can work quite well. So there are some stories you can use, so Relax Kids is something that's used a lot in the UK. So quite a lot of preschool settings use that. And again, I think they're on YouTube. So it's a story you can listen to, and it talks you through, and you listen and you breathe calmly. I mean, the advice generally is that you use, you can do meditation with children, and they recommend you use maybe a minute per child's age. So 3 minutes for a 3-year-old. I think in my experience, you start short and then you build it up with as long as a child can tolerate and can cope with. And some days they do more than others, but it's about that practice.
Yeah, I love, how you're explaining, you sometimes it's like mindful moments, and that you bring it in where it's needed, or you see maybe the whole class needs something. So you can bring in, like you mentioned about finger breathing, or change it up and see what's working with each child. So what are the kids saying about mindfulness practice to you?
I mean, certainly with 4-year-olds, they don't tend to say very much, to be honest. Right. They kind of just take it as that's what we do. But I've had older children, slightly older ones, who very much talk about it as, this is my mindfulness practice and we're practicing that. Having said that, certainly with the children that I work with, they don't tend to talk about it within that way. I've got friends, though, who use it with their 3 and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and they very much, because it's become a practice that's done at home regularly, They talk about it, they refer to it as their mindfulness practice, and it helps them to be calm and it helps them to be peaceful. So I think, yeah, it varies depending. I mean, my encouragement is very much to friends with young children. I'm always saying, introduce it really young. Yeah. You know, I have children who are in their 20s and will at some point have children, and I'm very much going, you know, you need to do this. You need to do it with them when they're really little. Get it in. Get it in.
Exactly. And how about your colleagues or parents that you interact with? What do they say?
So certainly as a team, we all use mindfulness. So we use mindfulness in our team meetings, in our staff meetings. We're all trained. So the manager of our team is a teacher of mindfulness. In fact, he's on a 2-week mindfulness retreat in India as we speak. So it's kind of very much embedded within our team and our practice. And parents, to be honest, we don't work very much with parents. We mainly work with schools and the children. Okay. I mean, within our schools, all the schools and our local authority have the opportunity to do mindfulness training for very, very cheap, very reasonable. So it's very much an embedded part of the work we do and that's happening across the authority, which is quite exciting. So they may not be trained in doing it with children, but they're trained in it in their own practice, and then they tend to use some things with the children. Yeah. And then within Britain, I mean, there's the Mind.B program, which I've trained with before, so I'm a trained teacher with that. But that's mainly it's aimed at older children, and I work with younger ones, so I've adapted stuff that works for that.
Yeah, the UK seems to be really doing a lot of work with mindfulness. I know there's the Mindful Nation, and it's being in the police and healthcare system, and the Myriad project, right, is a big research project happening. So it's wonderful, that's happening. Hope other countries follow suit. It's great. Great thing. So we have people watching that are, very new to mindfulness. We have people that have been working with mindfulness quite a lot, practice themselves, all kinds of people. So for the people that are just kind of being introduced to this practice, what are some of the challenges that they might face when working with young children, and how maybe can they get over those?
I think the initial, the big challenge is getting children to engage in it.
Right.
And for me, one of the reasons why I think mindfulness practice is really needed is my feeling. We know within the UK, mental health is a serious big issue, not only with teenagers and primary age children, but growingly with early years. And one of my gut feelings is one of the reasons behind that is we have such busy lives, and our children have very busy lives, and they're quite noisy. And I think we're afraid to encourage children to stop and encounter stillness. So for me, mindfulness practice is a really important part of that, encountering some stillness and some silence. So I think often people are worried and say, how are you going to get a 3-year-old who's kind of really lively and into things? How on earth are they going to stop and engage? And my encouragement would be, try it. It works. It really does work. And for me, I think the changing moment for me was when I was on a study trip in Denmark, probably about 10 years ago now, and I saw a little girl. She was about 4, and she was lying on a water trough, a wooden water trough, just lying on her back, looking up at the sky, and she was completely at peace and at one, and was silent and still. And I sat and observed her and watched her for over 20 minutes, just in this pace. She wasn't asleep. She was just totally at one and calm. And I had a real light bulb moment. It really affected me because I watched her and sat and thought, when have I seen that in the UK? When have I seen a child being allowed to do that for an extended period of time, not doing anything, not being engaged in anything particularly? I mean, she was doing something, but, not an obvious engagement. And when was the last time I did that? And it really got to me, actually. It really made me think. So my encouragement would be, actually, our children, my experience is children love it. And I work with some of the most challenging children at times, to be honest. You know, my work is really high end, quite challenging things. But helping them to calm, encouraging them to use mindfulness is such a good life skill. And they really, really respond, even when they are far-flung, kind of in a moment of this is too much. If you've been using that practice before, they do recognise it does bring them down. Yeah. The key is to get them before they get to that point, obviously, but it definitely, it's really worth persevering with, and just doing little bits, little moments. Try some of the exercises that maybe I've talked about, or go on YouTube. There's some really good things on YouTube now under mindfulness for young children. Try them out, give them a go. And if the child doesn't like it, first of all, keep going, keep trying different ones. You know, we talk about with early years children, it can take a child up to 14 times to try new food. I used to work with children who had eating difficulties. And in the same way, you know, you have to persevere with it. Don't give up if 2 or 3 times they've rejected it. It might take 5 or 6 attempts for them to sit. And if they only sit for a nanosecond, that's okay. Next time it'll be 2 nanoseconds. It will slowly build up.
Yeah, I love all those suggestions, Sonia. And I forgot to mention, Sonia provided a PDF that has lots of great simple mindfulness activities, so you can download that. And I also just wanted to mention, you know, that what you saw in Denmark, it was Denmark, right, that you said?
Yeah.
I think that's so important, because sometimes we think, you know, we're supposed to fill up every moment, and even in our own lives, right? So that's a really beautiful point of just letting somebody be and have that experience. So you mentioned before that you and your colleagues, you know, you practice mindfulness in your meetings, you all have your own practice. How important do you think it is for preschool teachers or parents to develop their own practice before sharing things with kids?
I do think it's essential. I think having your own, I mean, certainly the Mind.B training in Britain are very kind of quite strict on that, and they say you have to have been developing a practice for, I think it's 6 to 9 months before you can do their course. I think it's an important thing to be able to know what it is and the impact it has on your own life. I mean, there are loads of mindfulness courses out there now that you can either pay for or just do online. Yeah. But I think it gives you, by doing it yourself, I'm a big believer that we don't ever do anything with children that we're not prepared to do ourselves. So you would never do a mindfulness practice with a child and telling them to do it, and you wouldn't do it with them. You would do it at the same time. And before that, really, it's a good idea. Just try it out. Have a go on your own. Because if you haven't done it before, you suddenly try it with a child, it might feel really strange, and the child will pick up on that. But it's good practice. And I bore my friends to death by saying to them regularly, do you know what, you really need to be doing some mindfulness practice. I am a massive advocate of it. I think for me, it's really changed my life. I know it has. It's really helped me deal with some very difficult times. I think it's essential.
Yeah, me too. That's why I'm doing this. It's also changed my life, and I'm really passionate about bringing that to young children. I think it can be such a great tool for them. So just before we end today, maybe you can talk a little bit about any books or resources that you recommend for our viewers to check out.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned the going on YouTube and looking at the Zen breathing and the Zen yoga. That's quite good. A book I really like is The Mindful Child by Susan Kaiser Greenland. It's quite an old book. It was one of the first ones I've read, but I still really rate it. I think it's great. She's got some lovely ideas in there. Another one that's a more recent one I quite like is called Calm Kids by Lorraine Murray. And again, I really like that. And then a third one I've used with one particular boy is called Sitting Like a Frog, and it has a CD with it. And I can't think off the top of my head her name. I haven't got it here.
Snell, I think. Elaine
There you
Snell.
go. Yeah, that's right. And so those three I've used their ideas and their thoughts quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they
Yeah,
would be my
that's
tips.
and Lorraine's on the summit. She was on last year as well.
Okay.
She's great. Yeah, we had Susan on our one for older kids in June last year. So, yeah, they're
And I think with all their ideas, you can adapt them for younger children. And that's the thing I would say is quite a lot of things out there for mindfulness is for older children. But actually, my experience is all really adaptable. Make it work. You know your child. Just adapt it slightly. You know, don't be afraid to do that. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sonia, for sharing all those great, really practical ideas. I'm sure the parents and teachers watching are going to be excited to try out and learn more about. So thank you for coming on the summit and for sharing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye.